In this video, I want to create a mechanic where we can define an area inside of our level and then test for a key input. So let's say a interact, we'll use E in this case. We'll test for a key input and say, if we're inside the area and we press the E key, then do a thing. I'm going to build this inside of my level blueprints, but there's no reason why you couldn't do this inside of an actor blueprint if you want something a little bit more modular. I'm really just trying to show you that you can do both. You just have to set them up a little bit differently, and you should get used to both. And this is our previous one. And I think this is a good opportunity where we can add a big comment to this. So inside of our level blueprints, which we just opened up here, first, let's highlight everything here that we did before, hit C, and now we can add a big comment block around it. I think this was testing audio visual feedback or something, whatever you did, it's fine. You'll see if we click and drag on this, we can actually move that out of the way, which is pretty cool. We can read it from far away. First, I need to define an area for my interaction. For the level blueprint, it's a box trigger. So I'm going to type in box trigger. You'll notice I'm going to start moving a little bit more quickly with the boilerplate stuff. I'm going to resize this just like we did before. We have some space here. Now, another thing I'm going to do that I didn't do before, because we're testing this, and I just want to make sure that I'm inside the trigger, I'm going to come down here and under rendering on this box trigger where it says actor hidden in game, this will hide it whenever I'm in play mode. You can actually simulate this by hitting the G key, just like that. This is simulating play mode. You'll see how it hides a lot of things. I'm gonna hit G again just to toggle that back on. So now I can see my volumes, but I think I want to see this inside of play mode, at least while we're testing. So actor hidden in game, I'm going to disable that. You'll see if I hit play. Now I can see it inside my game. All right, now that I can see it, I'm going to make sure that this is selected. I'm going to come into my level and I'm going to start carving this out. Now let's think about what we want. What we're really trying to do is say, while the player is inside of the volume, allow E press. Whenever they're outside of the volume, don't allow E press. And there's a couple ways we could do this. We could keep track of a Boolean that we're turning on whenever they enter and turning off whenever they exit. But I want to use this opportunity to talk about another very useful blueprint node called gate. So first, I'm going to make sure that my trigger box is selected. And I still need an actor, let's call this begin overlap. We can start typing this. We could go through the menu too, but I think we're moving past that. Add on actor begin overlap. So this is saying when the player enters the trigger volume, we want to do a thing. And I'm going to right click and add another one. I'm going to show you. But now we can also say on end overlap. So this is whenever the player exits the volume. I'm going to add that one too. What we want to do is we want to say when they begin overlapping, when they enter the trigger, allow the code to continue. If they exit the trigger, don't allow this code to continue. And we'll do that with a gate. But first, we want to test to make sure it's the player. So I'm going to drag off this node right here. And I want to do another cast too. You know, I've shown you a couple different ways you could check for the player, but I want to really make sure you understand this. All I'm doing with a casting is testing. I'm essentially converting my object into something more specific. But in this case, I'm testing to make sure that this generic object is the first person character right here, this blueprint. And if it is, then continue. You could also do this with get player pawn or all these other things. And this specifically is testing if this blueprint entered. And you know, if we had different kinds of player controllers, this may not work. But I think this is another opportunity to talk about casting. So I'll do it here. Lots of different ways to do everything we want. So in this case, the other actor, I want to make sure it's the player. So I'm going to drag off that and say cast to, and we may remember, or we could look this up, first person character. Remember how we tested with the projectile? This one's the character. We'll hook that up. I'm going to copy paste that down here too. Other actor, right? Not overlapped. And now we say, okay, we can guarantee that the character is the one that entered this volume. So now we can continue. The next thing we need to do is do our gate. Our gate, I'm going to drag off. We've guaranteed that this is the first person character. I'm typing gate and just select the gate node. And I'm going to disconnect this actually. Enter is going to be the code we want to test. And open is going to be open up this gate, allow this node to let the enter pass through. Close is going to be don't let the enter pass through. And then exit is just going to be the next thing that's going to happen. So in other words, when we press the E key, we want to enter. And if the gate is open because we've called it this last, then allow it to continue. But if it's closed, then don't allow it. So we want our on begin overlap to open, right? Start allowing the E input. And we want our actor end overlap to close, right? Stop allowing the E input as soon as the player has exited the trigger volume. Now we need to test the key. Now this is a little bit weird. We want to type in capital E and a lot of stuff is going to pop up. So if I hit space and start typing in key, then you'll see this long list. This is actually an event, keyboard events. And you can test different keys here. The better way to do this would be to map this to an action inside of your inputs. But that could get complicated. I just want to show you the example. So I'm going to hit the E key right here, events for when the E key is pressed or released. When E key is pressed, we want to enter the gate and see what happens. If the last thing that happened is the actor entered the trigger, then we want to allow it to persist. And if they exited, we don't, right? This is a just really tidy way of keeping track of a Boolean that is allow or don't allow, all in a single node. So pretty handy trick for you. I'm going to compile and save right here. And the last thing I need to do is actually do a thing. I think, any number of things you can do. We've been toggling a light just to prove something. I think we can do that again. I think that'd be fine. Yeah, and so then I'll just do the light toggle in this case. So I'm going to come back to my level right here. And remember, this is all inside the level blueprints. There's no reason we couldn't do all of that inside the actor blueprints. The code would look a little bit different. And I'm going to add a light to my scene. In this case, I'm going to use a hotkey. So hold L, click. I just clicked on the wall right there. And that made a light, or you could find it up here. It's going to be a point light. And I'm going to change the color to be something a little bit more interesting. Let's do green. All right, let's position this. Okay, let's pull it down a little bit. Now, what I want to do is when I enter, I want to allow the player to do input, and then that will turn the light on and off. So with that selected, I'm going to hop back into here. Okay, and then exit. And again, I just want to toggle the light on and off. If this was an animation, you could play or reverse or whatever. Doesn't matter. You could use a flip-flop node too. Just to keep the example simple, I'm just going to select the light right there. Right click, say create a reference to point light. And I'm just going to use the toggle visibility here. But again, you could use that flip-flop node for other things. Save myself some screen space, and then say exit. All right, so when we enter the trigger, allow us to receive input. If we're allowed, toggle the visibility. When the player exits, cut this off, don't allow E input anymore, and then don't allow us to do anything. So let's try that out. Pile save, minimize. Starts it on, so maybe we rendering, turn that off by default. Save. Okay, play. Now, if I hit E when I'm not inside the trigger, you'll see nothing happens. But if I enter the trigger and hit E, you'll see now I can turn it off. But as soon as I exit, it no longer receives input. So this is really handy if you have like a interact with a computer in your game, or press this button to open the door or whatever. You will notice though that it's based off of being in and out of the trigger. So even if we're not facing the light, we can turn it on and off. If you wanted to also restrict whether or not we're looking at the thing, you could, there's other ways to do that, raycasts or line traces or whatever. But I think this is enough to prove the point. allowing input inside of a trigger volume to do a thing. And this thing that you want to do can be anything, and it could be inside of an actor blueprint or a level blueprint, and really offers you a lot of flexibility and mechanics that you could hook up into this, you know? Maybe hit the button and then play the exit cutscene. So this is a really pretty cool and flexible mechanic for you, and something good to know how to do. And additionally, we got to learn a little bit more about logic flow, and in this case, a gate, which is a pretty handy node, and receiving input. So we learned a couple things in this video.